Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Man of Steel. So, this, of course, is the origin story of Henry Cavill's Superman, which, in all honesty, I can say that I enjoy this film. Uh, Really, it's a really good origin story while DC was actually doing good films. Even though there was a lot of like sponsorship in the background and whatever through this movie, I could say it's like, well, man, but like they were doing like DC was actually doing so many good movies during this time. Like there was still the Christian Bale Batman movies to kind of linger on to, and there was this movie coming out, and everybody was like, man, DC is just banging on all cylinders, as Marvel was to eventually become an MCU at some point. Uh, but yeah, like we had these movies, and then all of a sudden, what came after that was like Batman versus Superman, and all of a sudden we're like, okay, that was a mistake. Then all of a sudden it just started to just be like a snowball effect of just a lot of movies that a lot of people were just like, nah, like I could care less about this film. Um, but yeah, but eventually I'll go through and I'll watch those films, and eventually I'll go through because there's still stuff like Aquaman to still comb through. There's still certain movies to kind of pick and choose, and just like, like I want to see if this one holds up, if this one's a good movie, and whatever. So, but this movie to me, honestly, is a great film. I like it. It's kind of surprising because I thought this was going to be another one of those where it's like, yeah, this film doesn't like hold up. There's so many problems with it. Blah 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 blah. Like for a lot of people that have also like seen the show Yellowstone, like this kind of gives me some kind of flavor of that for some odd reason because we of course have Kevin Costner's character Jonathan Kent here, who is to just kind of be this farmer, and Costner is this farmer, and what other thing do you have Kevin Costner technically being a farmer in but Yellowstone? So like I'm having to weirdly connect that whole thing together, but yeah, so let me know in the comments below how you felt about Man of Steel. If you've never seen it, if you couldn't been bothered, maybe like I'll tell you this. For me, I went on and I boycotted uh, Superman Returns. I couldn't have been bothered to not go into theaters and see it, and surefire enough because I was like, no, I just don't like for like I have this feeling that it's just not going to be all that good of a movie, so I didn't go into theaters. I kind of waited till I think it was just a thing where you could easily have rented it, and then I rented it. I'm like, there you go, like that movie was just overall like a like failure as far as story and far as whatever and far as approaches and whatever, but like I still want to go through and watch Superman Returns just to kind of see uh if I still have that inkling feeling whatever of that film. But they just rebooted it with this thing, with Man of Steel, and so it's just like, well, like I don't have to go through every single one of the other XYZ films, and then go on to Superman Returns because I feel like that's like a fifth film technically. But anyways, so yeah, let me know in the comments below how you felt about any of these Supermans, because I'm sure there's some people that are like, oh, I only love this one. Oh, I only liked this. And some people may like Superman Returns. Uh, Really, some people might go on and be in the minority of a lot of things, because there are some people that are to like certain superhero movies where I'm like, really? That one? Like, like I just have to kind of rationalize or figure out like okay, why that one out of all these ones? It's like the polar opposites of people, where it's to find that interesting thing where they end up saying that this is their favorite movie of all time, and I'm just scratching my head why, because it's fun to just kind of figure out like, well, out of all of them, why this one? So with that said, uh, overall, great film. What is this one really about? As far as teeing this movie up for people, really the only thing that is to be really worthwhile to tee up is basically this is the retelling of Kal-El slash Clark Kent slash Superman, and basically it's a story that is to reinvent this character, not have him just be this kid on this farm, or to be right away having him going to the Daily Planet, and like they go on and experiment a lot more with this character, and we also get to have some experimenting things going on with Krypton, and also just certain things in general to kind of just um, have fun with this this story. And we of course don't have Lex Luthor in this approach, but we do have a LexCorp tanker that is to be used in this movie, which is kind of a little Easter egg. Really, for me, I don't know if I really am gonna go out of my way to go on and do like any of the actual sequels after this, as far as uh, Batman v Superman, because like for that one, like that movie was just like, man, that movie was all over the place, and every single time that I watch it, it feels like I'm watching it for the very first time, because that movie is just a jangled mess of whatever. And so maybe I will go through it just like, oh no, this movie is actually much more surprising than I thought it would, because I also like want to go into that just for the Batman parts, because there was a lot of people that gone on to say it's like, oh, Ben Affleck is the best Batman, and I'm like, okay, why? Why justifiably is he technically the best? Um, how many movies has he done with this character? Well, we get uh, BVS, and then we get Justice League, and that's gonna be it. We have him technically doing some cameo stuff in Flash, but that's basically like wrapping up that character. That's saying that that character is going to uh, be resolved, because Ben Affleck was to say that he no longer wants to do that character, and that movie is probably going to be his swan song, so to speak, of him just finishing up that story. So, with that said, so yeah, so this movie to me is a great film, and people may feel opposite. People may feel that this film sucks. So let me know in the comments below how you feel about this, because you might be a person that stubbornly goes into this movie and there's a comment like, "Yeah, this movie sucked. I hated it." Like, okay, sure. So I just feel it's a great movie. So let's go out of our way to go into that double five time territory, as I've already talked for far too much about this one. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Went very vague about the whole teeing it up thing, but like, really, it's this movie has also been out for a while. Also, it's been out for a number of years. So it's kind of hard to just be like, well, anything that I'm going to say in the tee up sense is probably just going to give the movie away. Um, it's more interesting to just kind of bask in this movie, and how I was like, man, this is such still an enjoyable piece. So let's go into this piece. So we, of course, go on here, and we have it where uh, this is to, of course, be Krypton. we have it where Laura, Jor-El's wife, is to be giving birth to Kal-El, and this is the first natural birth in centuries for Krypton to be delivering a child. So we, of course, go on here, and we have we eventually have these kind of things kind of like showcasing us like a visual of sorts, and those items are actually to be called Cellor, or so every bit of these little like devices that you kind of see that are just kind of showing some image or some head or something, I guess they're just called Cellors, weirdly enough. So we go on, and of course we have Kal-El, who's going to be prepped to go into his Starcraft. That's the ship that you end up seeing at the Kent farm, because Jor-El is to go to his councilmen and tell them that this planet is lost because of them going on and mining for resources, and because of them going on and mining resources, we of course have like so much of this planet now like destroying itself, so on and so forth. So we go on, and we have, of course, General Zod, who is to make his way into the council meeting, and he is to start to kill off certain council members. And so Jor-El and Zod are kind of talking it out here, and General Zod is like, well, hey, like we should try to save our people, and Jor-El was going on and wanting to ask for the Codex, and so we really just find out here that it's kind of like a scramble for the Codex. It's a scramble to like who's gonna like save this planet first, and it seems like Zod has his way about wanting to do things, which is basically take control over people, and Jor-El's way about going about things is to go and take the Codex, which he does take, and is to infuse both the Codex with Kal-El, and to make it so that every single like thing that is to be from Krypton, of people and whatever, is to all be in the blood cells of course, Kal-El here. So, and it'll get to the point where we have Zod asking, it's like, well, if I kill Kal-El, will this still affect us not getting the Codex out of him? And they're like, no, like we can kill him and still get the Codex out of him. So live or dead, it doesn't matter. So we go on here, and we of course have it where after Zod is starting to kill a number of council members, the rest of the council decides to go and take Zod and, of course, put him in the Phantom Zone, because this is basically similar to the other story. So we go on, and we, of course, have it where Zod, before he is to go into the Phantom Zone, he is to go on and kill Jor-El, after Jor-El is to go and take the Codex, put it into his son, and Zod is to find Jor-El and slice into him and murder him, after, of course, Jarrell is to find a flying beast called the uh, Haraka and go and fly off to go and drop and swim into the codex, grab it, and then, of course, fuse it into his son. So I want to make sure that we have like a number of scenes that are all going on in Krypton and so on and so forth. So after Jor-El's death, now we end up having, of course, have the interesting line that Zod is to deliver here, where he's like, "I will find him," where he's consistently telling Laura, "It's like, well, I will find the son of Jor-El. Like, I will find him," yelling out that. So we go on here, and so Zod is to be sent to the Phantom Zone. But the bizarre thing is, once Krypton dies, we of course have, like in the other story, all of a sudden that is to free Zod from his imprisonment from the Phantom Zone by the destruction of Krypton. So, so we go on here, and so I want to make sure all my bases are covered. So yeah, I kind of feel like they're mostly covered here. So we go on, and we now transition uh, to have uh, Clark Kent go on and become this greenhorn that is working on this. I'm assuming it's a crab ship, but I'm not. I'm not 100% certain about that. It's kind of like a Deadliest Catch kind of situation here, where we of course have Clark working at a very dangerous job, where he's probably not being called Clark Kent. He's probably being called some other name like Phil or Bill or whatever, so he can keep his secret identity, because he'll know at some point that he's going to have to use his powers for some odd reason. So all of a sudden, we have at one point that there is to be this big Nedva thing that's going to drop on Clark here. And so all of a sudden, we have one guy who is to grab Clark and shove him out of the way from him going on and getting hit by this cage. And this guy's like, "Hey man, watch where you're going." It's like, well, I don't think Clark really has that problem. So we go on, we consistently have this guy being called a greenhorn, which basically means that he's green, that he's a rookie here, and hence why they're going to call him that until he's no longer a greenhorn, or until there's a certain amount of time that eventually he can no longer be the rookie, uh, hence why the name. So we all of a sudden have Clark, who is watching on as a number of these kind of fishermen here are to see this oil rig. And this oil rig, of course, is to be on fire. And really, they're going on the radio talking about rescue attempts. But they're like, no, like, it's pointless. These guys are already dead. To where then Clark replies, like, not for me, they're not. So we all of a sudden have, of course, the captain of Clark's ship asking for binoculars, and Kent's gone. So Clark goes on and is to tear through one of the doors of this oil rig to rescue all of these oil rig people, all these miners. So we go on and we have him like go and kind of like wave people over to get to this chopper. And so all of a sudden we have, of course, Clark here realizing that, because I don't want to call him Superman yet because he doesn't have the suit, so it makes sense. So Clark goes on is to see like a thing kind of leaning down and is going to fall over onto this helicopter and crush it and kill the people he's trying to save. So Clark goes on and is to use his super strength to keep this thing up so that way this helicopter has time to fly off. And then we have Clark who's like, "Ugh," and he's like really just getting like really aggressive with his strength here. So we have the helicopter flying off, and then all of a sudden we eventually see where Clark is to be in the water, and he's just kind of floating with all the debris. But eventually he vanishes. So we of course have a flashback where Clark is in school, and he all of a sudden is to have his powers, I guess, start to kick in. Where all of a sudden, all at once, he is to start to have super hearing, X-ray vision, and a number of things. Clark's teacher, as well as certain students that is to be like Lana Lang or Pete Ross, which kind of funny and kind of funny to see like Pete here because when really looking at it, uh, there's actually a Pete Ross in Smallville that ends up being Clark's best friend in that show. Um, and it's kind of weird to kind of see a tweakingly different variation of Pete Ross in this show. But if anybody has not have heard of Smallville, go ahead and check it out. It's a pretty interesting show, and it kind of follows to be fairly familiar territory to this movie. So we go on. We have Clark who is desperately go into some janitor's closet, and he is to use his heat vision to burn this door, preventing anybody from coming in. So we have it where this teacher is to go and call Martha, Clark's mother, to come to this school. So Martha is to make her way here, and we have it to where Clark is to mention that the world is so big, and Martha's saying it's like, we'll make it small, like make it to where like you can hear my voice and only my voice, and just kind of concentrate. So eventually, Clark is to just kind of figure it out and kind of hone his ability, and so he gets out of the room and he hugs his mother, and I guess he possibly goes back to school, or maybe he has a sick day. Not quite sure. They don't exactly say it. So we go on and we have Clark, who after saving this oil rig is to go on and steal some clothes. And so we go on and we just consistently have to have both current time and flashbacks being done here. And so we of course go on and have the story of which uh, where Clark Kent and the number of people that I've already mentioned in his flashback with Lana Lang and Pete Ross and so on and so forth. I guess no Lex Luthor in this flashback because I guess Clark and Lex Luthor didn't have like a real like childhood growing up past, I guess, together. So considering we don't exactly know how old, well, I'm assuming Lex is way younger in this world, I guess, so he probably wouldn't have been in the same school that Clark was, because he seems younger in this story. So we go on, and we of course have it where there's to be a bus accident where all of a sudden this bus is to be going into this water, all these kids are drowning, and of course Clark is to spring into action, and he is to go and push this bus to where all the water is to drain out of it. Lana Lang is looking on at Clark, noticing that he was to possibly be the guy to push this bus to safety, and then he goes diving back in, I think, to retrieve Pete. And so we go on here, and we have, of course, now Jonathan and Martha going on and talking to uh, talking to some woman mentioning that, like, oh my god, all these kids had noticed what Clark had done. Like, this is providence. This is God. Or, like, Clark is some god. And they're like, I don't think you guys saw what you thought you saw, and so on and so forth. And, like, just kind of be happy that you're freaking alive at this point, also. Um, I think this might have been Pete Ross's mother. So we go on and we have Jonathan who goes and talks to Clark, and we have it to where Jonathan and Clark are really kind of having this back and forth thing of whether Clark should have really saved those people or not. And Clark is like, well, like, I have these abilities, like, why can't I use them? And, like, should I just have let those people die? And Jonathan's like, well, maybe, like, I don't know. Um, but the more that he risks being, like, outed like this, the more that, like, they fear for Clark's safety, and they fear for their own safety. So Jonathan is to finally go on and give, uh, of course, Clark uh, his key to his starcraft, and tell him that Jonathan is to tell him that he went to a metallist or metallurgist, and it seems that they couldn't find anything similar to this on planet Earth, and or probably in maybe any other kind of planets or whatever. So it of course must not be from this Earth. And so we go on here and of course also showcase to Clark this spaceship, and to kind of show him it's like, well, yeah, like, you aren't from this world, and you're going to have to go on and spend the rest of your life, no matter how long it takes, to figure out what was the reasoning for your parents to bring you here. And so after after getting this huge massive blow of, like, oh my god, like, these parents aren't really my parents, and Clark is going on and saying that, like, well, like, can I just still be your son? And Jonathan's like, well, you'll always be my son. Like, but it's like, you have, like, another father, you have another mother too. So, like, you need to go and figure out, like, what that is, like, where you come from, and so on and so forth. So we go on and we have Clark now at some bar, kind of doing this odd, like, I guess, waitressing job, or waiter job, or, like, I think he's maybe just like a dishwasher, not quite sure, because it just seems like he is to kind of clean up after people. So we go on here and we have a guy named uh, Ludlow. Ludlow? That sounds kind of weird. So Ludlow is to go on and be itching for a fight here. Ludlow is to go on and kind of get a little handsy with this waitress, to where all of a sudden Clark's to step in and just be like, hey, like, how about you knock it off, kind of thing. And so we have Ludlow that's just, like, chucking a beer in this guy's face, and going on and uh, kind of tossing a thing onto Kent's back, like, bullseye, like, really just egging on and wanting to desperately have Kent just fight him, but he won't. So Kent goes and takes his apron and is to make his way outside to completely tear apart this guy's truck with all of the lumber that this guy is to be hauling and just tear through this guy's truck. So when Ludlow is to make it back to his truck, he's realized that it's completely torn up, damaged, and whichever. So we now go on here and we have Lois Lane that is to make it in supposedly some part of Canada because that's what they say in this movie. It's to be like Canadian soil is where she's going here, to go into this like almost Antarctic like uh, environment, where she's to go on and meet with Dr. Hamilton and God, Nathan, uh, Colonel Nathan Hardy. And so it seems like we have an arrangement here that that both of them have gone on and talked about. Like both of them are having to forcibly be here, um, and so we have Hardy here who goes and uh, gives Lois this little place for her to kind of set up her things. And we have Lois who's asking, it's like, well, what if I need to tinkle? And Hardy's like, I think there's a bucket in there. Like, I don't give a like, I don't want you working here. So if you could just get out of here as quickly as possible, that'd be great. So we go on, and of course, we have Lois going on, and she is starting to follow who, of course, is to eventually be Clark because I guess he's the only one that seems suspicious out of everyone else. So Clark goes on and is to eventually just kind of jog his way around to try to figure out where is the exact spot for him to go and enter this scout ship, because that's the thing that's kind of stuck in the ground here, is to be this scout ship, because that's what they end up calling it. So I'm like, oh, okay. Like, there's going to be some times that I'm not going to know the exact terminology of certain Kryptonian ships. Like, there was to be the one ship that tried to attack uh, Jor-El at the early stages of this movie, where it was like the Krypton uh, ship of sorts, which there's a many different kind of names here that they kind of throw around with these Kryptonian ships, and some of them actually look identical to one another. Uh, we have certain names like Kryptonian spacecraft. We have Scoutcraft. Um, we have Black Zero, which is to be the ship that uh, Zod and his people are to come to this place to. And then we have the World Engine, which like is to be connected to the Black Zero. Um, and then we have the dropship. So yeah, there's kind of a number of names and stuff like that. And then we have also the Starcraft that is to be the thing that Kal-El came to this planet with. Uh, so there's that. Isn't that great? So, and I didn't mention stuff like the Citadel, or any number of other kind of places that could have been a setting thing, because I'm sure there might have been something somewhere. Or I didn't mention the Genesis chamber, that of course Kal-El was born in, or that Jor-El had taken the codex from, and so on. I didn't mention that room. Um, and so yeah, so there's all that. There's me talking and covering all of that. So, or that the Kryptonians were wearing battle armor, because there's a difference between like their normal like this kind of outfit and their battle armor that we end up seeing most of the Kryptonians wear. Like Jor-El eventually kind of switches between like his normal kind of hope symbol to then his battle armor, and so there's a difference. There is. So we go on into this film, and so Clark is to make his way to this scout ship and is to put his key in there. And so it seems that one of these little devices, these little drone things, that of course are to be called the Celors, uh, and I don't know if this is exact word of thing of whatever, but so one of these drones things starts to attack Kal-El here, and he eventually goes on and is to uh, take it and not like fight against it, because he chucks this key in there, and then it stops attacking him. But all of a sudden, Lois is to be following him with her Nikon camera, and so when Lois is to start to take photos and start to take photos of this little droid thing, all of a sudden she ends up getting attacked by this and she ends up getting wounded. And so Kal-El is to notice that she's there and decide to heat vision her wound so that way it'll stop bleeding. And he's like, well, hold on to my hand because this is going to hurt. So we go on here, and so after Clark is to take this scout ship and go off and leave Lois with these guys at supposedly Canada, we go on. We have, of course, Lois backtracking and kind of following the trail of breadcrumbs to find all these kind of unique stories that eventually all lead her to make it back to eventually finding Pete Rose and desperately wanting his story, or Pete Ross. And eventually that leads uh, us to eventually have uh, Lois easily make it back to Martha, which means that Lois would eventually easily figure out that Clark is Superman here. So we of course have Clark, who is to be at the gravesite of Jonathan Kent, and so we have it to where Lois is to ask Superman. It's like, well, like it seems like you have a story to tell, and like I want to tell your story, and Superman is like, well, what if I don't want my story to be told? And she's like, well, like you should. So all of a sudden, because Lois is to interact with Clark here, she's deciding, you know what, like I think I won't go on and try to like expose this story, even though we have it to where Lois is to go on and take this story to Perry White, and Perry White's like, no, I don't want anything to do with this, because like if what you're saying is true, like no one wants to believe that there's an alien out there. Like this is a really like scary story for anybody to think about and whatever. And so we have it where Lois goes and takes this story to Woodburn, because this guy is to be some kind of conspiracy theorist guy that is to have a number of websites. So Lois is to go on and send this website to Woodburn. Woodburn has put this thing out there. And so Perry White is to go on and be furious with Lois and give her a suspension 2 weeks without pay because of what she had done there. And because Lois just wanted this story out, she didn't care like what she had to do to get this story out. She just wanted it out. So we go on, and we of course have Kal-El going and now being in this scout ship. And so we have all of a sudden Jor-El going on and kind of appearing through the ship. And so Clark is now kind of confused about this, starting to follow this ghost that is basically be his father, because his father is still dead. So instead of being this like crystal that is to appear, like so a face that appears on some crystal or some goofy thing like that, or some voice off in the distance, no, we actually have an actual Jor-El that's actually physically in front of us. It's kind of interesting. So we go on here, and I'm kind of curious if they are to go back and do any number of these things. Are they still going to keep having Russell Crowe come back, or if they're going to have at some point maybe Kal-El's mother at some point come through the story at some point, if Russell Crowe just doesn't want to go and do any more of these, if they ever go back to this, which seems like they probably won't at this point, which kind of sucks. So we of course have it to where we really have Jor-El going on and giving us a review of what had already happened at the very beginning of this movie, and that eventually he's to break down that this is a scout ship that he's in, and that really the Kryptonians are all to be these miners, and they're to go throughout a number of different planets to go and mine for resources. And I guess for their planet they had mined it far too far, and basically that ended up just crippling their planet by doing that. So, and a lot of other kind of Superman stories would kind of reiterate this same kind of story when eventually this thing came out. So we go on, and we of course have it where Jor-El is giving Kal-El his suit, and saying that at some point that the human race will want to, of course, run alongside Kal-El at some point. They will stumble and they will fall, but eventually they will be alongside him, sharing in the gaze of the sun. We end up finding out that Kal-El is to have gone through and had this Earth sun be a radiation of sorts that is to have made, of course, Clark stronger, and of course have all these powers they wouldn't normally have had on Krypton, because I guess the sun just has this weird radiation. I'm like, why couldn't they have technically like harnessed that? Like, but you do also have the whole like all-star Superman thing where if Clark is to get too much of the sun, then he could eventually die or explode or whatever, come far too powerful, and possibly that would just lead to his ultimate death at some point if he absorbs too much of the sun. But anyways, so we go on, and we have, of course, Clark trying to fly. we have it to where he kind of really just bounces quite a bit, but then eventually tries to like fly, but like he never really quite gets there. So we then go on and let's showcase, of course, the stuff that kind of happens after this, where we're to now have to show the story of why Jonathan Kent is to now be dead, because I didn't mention that. So we go on and we of course have this argument between both Clark and Jonathan, where like I think Clark is just wanting to just kind of go on to his own, and he's still just like, well, why can't I like be this hero yet? Like, why can't I go on and be who I want to be? And like, really, why is it that you people are deciding when I can do this? Because like, you people are just uh, like humans that were to go on uh, and find me. Like, you're not my real parents, you're not my real mother, and you're not my real dad. And so we have it to where Jonathan is like, well, yes, that's technically right. So all of a sudden, we have it to where there is to be some tornado that is all of a sudden forcing Jonathan and everybody to just start evacuating from where they are. And so they're all scrambling, I guess, to get like underneath this kind of bridge or under this kind of safe location. And so Jonathan is giving Clark, of course, uh, a kid and telling him to like get under the underpass or whatever that they are at. So Jonathan, all of a sudden, because of a dog, he dies because of a dog. Like that's kind of like the weakest part of this movie is like Jonathan really just dies because of a dog technically. But really, when looking at it, like we have it to where like Jonathan is technically limping here, and like there's so many holes that a lot of people just kind of poke through this moment and just think like, okay, this is kind of like the weakest part, but when really just kind of like, you know what, I could accept Jonathan dying here. So, because the story kind of needs this moment where uh, Clark is so tempted to use his power, and Jonathan's like, no, like, don't do it. Like, don't do it just for me. Don't do it for just one person. Like, you've already technically saved a number of these people. Using your power for me now, like, doesn't make sense. Where we have to go through that weighing back and forth of Jonathan saying, it's like, well, like, should you have let those people on that bus die? Maybe. To where we have it to where Jonathan is now contemplating like his own life in Clark's hands, which is kind of interesting. But we've kind of seen it at some point before where Clark has ran so fast that it is technically stopped time. So does Clark not have that ability? Because it seems like the Flash does, and there are certain times where the Flash has stopped time because he's running so fast, and Superman was to, of course, to see him and like, you're running so fast that you think that I can't spot you. Well, you'd be wrong. And then he goes after him and starts taking him down, um, as well as taking the rest of the group down when we end up kind of having him fight out the rest of the Justice League, with the exclusion of I think Batman. I'm not quite sure. We'll figure that out. So we go on, and of course, we have Clark, who is to scream out "No!" via this moment because, of course, his father is dead. So we now go on, and we let's go back to that whole like Perry and Lois talk, where Perry was to dock Lois 2 weeks without pay, but he's like, you know what? Like, I'm good that you're not going to go and try to run with this story. It's good that you're trying to like go cold with this story, but it still bothers me that you're doing that. So that it feels like she found something, and so that's kind of the distrust that Terry has of her, of like, you found something and now you're not talking. Why? So we have it to where finally Clark is to return home to Martha, and he of course ends up turning home, and she's like, "Oh my god!" like, and eventually we have it to where Martha eventually is to see Clark's suit, and so she has to kind of compliment him on that. So we go on here and we have the government who is to get or basically everywhere, who is to get a message coming from General Zod, basically telling everybody that they are not alone, and or he is not alone, which is to basically say like, hey, you're not the only Kryptonian in town now, because we're going to be here. So we go on, and plus also it's a symbol to tell like these people, it's like, hey, there is an alien race out there and now you are not alone. So we go on and we have General Zod, who's going on and saying that there of course is to be a Kryptonian among them that has probably lived with them for a number of years now. And so General Zod, of course, wants this outcast to be, uh, of course, brought back to them, or else they will suffer the consequences, kind of this and that. And so, all of a sudden, we have it to where now, like, people are coming out of the woodwork saying that Lois Lane is to know the secret of Superman, and all of a sudden, we have Perry calling Lois saying that like the FBI is throwing words around like treason, and that they're wanting to arrest Lois Lane because it seems like she has information on where Superman is, so on and so forth. So we go on, and so we have at one point young Clark is going on and getting bullied, and he is to go and bend this fence. So we of course have really Jonathan just watching on as this is to happen, because this is another flashback before he dies. And you would have thought they would have done this flashbacks to where it all makes sense, but I don't know, it is what it is here. So we of course have Jonathan talking to Clark and just saying like, well, like, I would have actually liked for you to have like punched him, and I know that you have liked to too, but like, that's the thing, like, you have to kind of like, uh you really have to kind of rein that in, because if you probably punch this guy, like, you could probably kill him, or you can probably just like punch him so hard it stops his heart, or whatever. Like, you could really damage somebody, and like, you still don't know your strength. So sorry, kiddo, but you're just gonna have to just like learn to just uh kind of channel that anger, so to speak. So we go on and we have Superman, who is to give himself up, surrender to General Swanwick. Uh, let's hope that I have that name correctly. Um, uh, Heaven forbid, right? Like, we have a freaking name that's Swanwick. There we go. Um, oh, also, here's one thing that I can also get into here. We eventually find out that General Swanwick is to have a other identity in another Justice League or DC kind of film, let's just say. Let's leave that fairly vague enough. Because a lot of people might be going into a certain version of a certain movie, like, well, hey, this never gets covered. What is he talking about? Let's just go and say that in the Snyder Cut, we find out that Swanwick is to have an alternative identity. And that's just really in the Snyder Cut because I don't think they covered anywhere else. And also, there's some stuff about the Snyder Cut that does feel better than the other Justice League, but overall, it's still a boring film. And it's a movie that's freaking 4 hours. Like I would never want to re-go through and rewatch the Snyder Cut to either better review it or to do different things with it. It's 4 hours of a movie that I didn't exactly like a second time around, with a tweakingly added scene version, whatever of whatever the heck that is. I could care less. So, but we go on and we have, of course, Clark, or we have Superman now because he's in a suit. He's surrendering. So he, of course, is to be cuffed and he's to be put into some interrogation room where he's talking to Lois because, of course, we have Superman mentioning that he wants to, of course, uh, talk to Lois, and after he is to give himself up, he's negotiating for Lois Lane's freedom. So we go on and we now have Superman wearing his duds, and so he goes in there and she's like, seriously, they're cuffing you? And he's like, well, yeah, I let them do that because, like, if it's to comfort them, then it's to comfort me. So we have it to where, like, Lois is looking at his chest. He's like, well, like, what does the S stand for? He's like, well, at my home, like, this is a stand for the symbol of hope. And so Lois is like, well, like, it's an S. Shouldn't you be wearing an H? Like, maybe it stands for, and all of a sudden we have guys that are going on and saying, like, well, like, Superman, like, what's your next step here? What's your next move? Like, we really want to know. And so Superman is going on and, like, breaking his cuffs and telling him that he knows who they all are. He knows who Dr. Hamilton is, and everybody in the other side of this mirror here. And eventually, like, he is to kind of tell what they're doing, and that none of it is really going to work here, so on and so forth. So we, of course, go on and have Superman deciding to go and turn himself in, and so we, of course, have um, Fiora, who is to go and retrieve Clark. But Fiora is to demand that she is to want Lois Lane, the woman of which that Clark likes the most. So we have kind of Hardy kind of budge in here, like, I'm sorry, like, we negotiated for Superman. We didn't negotiate for Lois Lane. Like, sorry, not gonna happen. But we have it to where Lois Lane is like, well, hey, if this can just speed this up, like, I'll give myself to these people. So we go on and have Fiora, who is to need Lois Lane to wear a mask that all the other Kryptons are wearing because it seems that this ship is not made um, for, of course, Lois Lane's autonomy or whatever it's called. Like, her atmosphere, like, is, like, not the same as the Kryptonians' atmosphere, so she'll need something to breathe and so on and so forth. So we go on here and we have, of course, Clark that or Superman that's taken to Zod, and all of a sudden we have it where Superman is to start to feel weak and start to feel dizzy, and then he freaking falls over. Where all of a sudden now he's in this weird, bizarre dream sequence with Zod, and so Zod is to mention that Kal-El's father was to be this scientist, and that Zod was to be like the head of the military, and that eventually they're going to go on and terraform the Earth into Krypton, and that eventually uh, Superman is probably going to die along with all of the other um, people, and he's going to take every single ancestor off of Superman's bones, basically, and so on and so. Paraphrasing here hugely. So we go on and we have Zod, who is, I guess, sifting all this information from this little sequence that we have here, and I guess Lois was going through the same thing, his or her same dream where she was kind of getting probed all this information. So we go on, and eventually we have Lois, who is to eventually get a key from Superman. And so Lois had to go on and put this key into the ship, and all of a sudden Jor-El is to appear, and Jor-El is telling Lois to get this firearm, and he's going to consistently close all these doors to protect Lois. And so Lois is going to go off onto this escape pod. And so we have Fiora that's desperately trying to get to Lois Lane, as Lois Lane goes on to uh, eventually change the atmosphere to not only help Lois Lane, but then is to also help Superman for him to bust out of uh, his shackles and go after the guy that had like shackled him, and take him out and be kind of like able to use his power again, because this ship is to be of Earth's atmosphere or similar. So we go on and we have, of course, uh, Jor-El going on and telling Kal-El to kind of smash through this one wall here, so that way Kal-El can see that Lois is kind of crash landing onto Earth, and that he needs to go and save her, because her ship had gone through some damages while trying to escape from the ship. So Superman goes on and is to fly off and try to save Lois, and he, of course, does so, and then is to be holding on to her, and eventually they kind of fly her to safety. So we now have it where, of course, Superman is to go on and fight all the Kryptonians. And we, of course, have it to where, of course, Superman is to fight Zod on Earth, and it eventually gets to where it seems that Superman is to figure out how to kind of destroy these guys' masks, to where all of a sudden, like, they have to forcibly adapt to Earth's atmosphere. And we have it to where Zod was going on and trying to find the Starcraft, and he tries to like terrify Martha for this information, and so Superman comes flying down to go and get Zod, and then battles with him, and eventually Zod kind of breaks his mask fighting Superman, and so Zod goes back into his ship. So both Fiora and some other Kryptonian are now going and fighting uh, Superman here. And so all of a sudden we have Hardy and his military force that are going on and just like, hey man, just shoot all these Kryptonians. Doesn't matter, just murder them all. At this point, it's like none of them are to be on our side. But eventually, we have Superman who honestly wins these military guys over because Superman is to consistently try and rescue a number of these military guys while almost being killed by these Kryptonians. We also had at one point where Dr. Hamilton was asking, of course, Superman, it's like, well, hey, like, we're kind of like, we're kind of scared that maybe you can give us some kind of disease or some kind of illness or some kind of something from your world. And Clark is just like, well, I've been here for 30 some odd years. Not going to happen. If it already has happened, it already would have. So I think you guys are fine. So we go on and we have Superman kind of fighting in Smallville, going up against these Kryptonians, and Hardy's getting in the way, shooting them with this helicopter, and going on and just pelting them with bullets, so on and so forth. So eventually, we have this helicopter crashing, and Fiora is going and at some point going to fight Hardy, and she's saying it's like, well, good death is its own reward. So that, I guess, is another big catchphrase from this movie because again, eventually Hardy is to give that same sentiment to Fiora here when eventually they go and they crash this plane. They crash the plane that they're in into another ship, but we'll get to that later. So so we go on and we have Superman who's trying to fight off these Kryptonians, but like eventually we have like this really cool moment where Superman is fighting Fiora, and they kind of go into this like bank vault, and that part was kind of visually look really cool looking. So, but we also have the moment where of course Superman was fighting the other, like the bigger Kryptonian. I don't know what his name is, and I couldn't be bothered to figure out what that actually is. And so we have them kind of like barreling through that Sears store and just kind of crushing a lot of stuff. And I was like, hee. I always have a good laugh at that for whatever reason. So we go on, and eventually we have after it seems that Clark is kind of done fighting these Kryptonians and they are to go off here. We eventually have it where Clark is to make it back to Martha's place because there's a car through her home, and so we have it to where like Clark is just kind of ticked because like Martha's house is now damaged, and like Martha's just like, well, it's just stuff. Like I'll come back for it later at some point. So we now have it to where they're like, just hey man, like we're gonna change this planet into Krypton anyway, so we might as well just start getting to terraforming. So they release the world engine, and they have Black Zero, who is to also be slaved to this planet also and stuck there for them to just kind of start mining this planet. And while they're doing that, we have it to where there are certain characters that are getting caught in the crossfire here. We, of course, have Perry White, Steve Lombard, and Jenny, who are all scrambling to try to get out, to try to get to a safe spot here. And eventually we have Jenny, who ends up getting stuck uh, in this rubble, and they're desperately trying to like kind of use some kind of supporting stuff to try to get her out, but they can't get her out. It's too heavy. There's too much debris. She's stuck in there, and so Perry, in this like really emotional moment, like they're holding hands, and like he's not going to leave her. He's just not. So we now, of course, have Clark, who has to just now scramble to, of course, now let me reset a second here. Uh, Clark has to now scramble to destroy the world engine, and Lois is kind of worried because she's like, well, like, are you gonna get weakened by this thing? Because it's technically turning the Earth into more of Krypton. And honestly, what I'm kind of thinking this, like, we do almost have it be that this is to be similar to the Superman Returns story, right? Because Lex Luthor went on to try and have certain crystals from Krypton and tried to make Earth more like Krypton. So isn't this kind of the same thing from that story? Sounds similar. Like, no, don't mention that story, or maybe like, ooh, mention that story because some people are fans of it. So we go on, and of course, we have Superman, who is to finally really have a strong fight here to rip his way through this world engine and taking it down. And so now we have it to where this is scramble here. So we go on, and we have, of course, Kal-El that is to go through the Black Zero ship, and we have it to where Zod is desperately trying to plead to Kal-El to not like destroy this ship. That if he destroys this ship, like it'll destroy any chance for Krypton to get a second chance here. And we have it to where like Kal-El at this point is like, well, like Krypton already had its chance. Like, sorry, like you guys you guys should have been better with your planet, or you guys should have found another planet that was equally as to benefit you as your other planet was, but you decided to go to this planet and try to take it over. So we have it to where, of course, Clark is or Superman is to go through and laser uh, through this one kind of chair that is to control the ship, and so the ship is kind of going down. And so we have Hardy, because the master plan is for them to take the uh, Starcroft, like the ship that Kal-El came in on, and their plan is to crash it into this scout ship that, of course, is to be Zod's, and kind of make sure that they take every bit of all of these like things out. Uh, and while they're doing that, we have Fiora that is trying to prevent Hardy from doing this, and so Lois is on that ship, and eventually she falls conveniently out of that ship for Superman eventually to catch her. And we, of course, having Hardy telling Fiora here, it's like, well, a good death is its own reward, as basically we figure out that Colonel Hardy is to be killed off here, Dr. Hamilton is to be killed off here, everybody's to be killed off here, with the exclusion of Zod and Superman to still like fight it out here, because like of course there to be this big massive battle still waging on between those two. So We go on and we again have another cool line between both Zod and Clark here, because we are of course going on, and when Zod is to now go and fight Superman here after Lois and Clark kiss, and she's like, "Well, yeah, after the first kiss, it all goes downhill from there." And Superman's like, "Well, that probably works for if a human is kissing another human, but we'll see about that." So, so we have Zod fighting Superman, and we have this one cool line when Zod is to kind of rip away his battle armor. He's mentioning it's like, well, like I trained my senses for years on Krypton. Like, where did you go and train? Oh, a farm. Like where have you received similar training? Oh, a farm. Ugh. So we go on and we have these two just battling out, tearing through buildings, destroying any number of things, and so eventually we have it where both uh, Zod and Superman are going on, and they're fighting, and now they're like fighting amongst civilians, and so Zod is to go on after all of his people are destroyed. We have it to where he has this heartbreaking moment where he's like, I did everything that I had to do for my people, and everything that I justified and everything that was just to save my people. Now I have no people. Because Zod is going to kill Superman here for what he had done. And so like they are to no longer be equals at all. So we go on, and eventually Zod is to decide to start murdering civilians and to use his heat vision to start lasering through a family, and so Superman is to go and start to like hold on to Zod's neck, telling him to stop this here, and Zod's like, never. And so Superman goes in, snaps Zod's neck, and then he's like, no, because now he has no Kryptonians now, with the exclusion of Supergirl, which not quite sure where she's connected in the whole like DCEU. Probably nothing at all, unless they eventually have a DCEU Supergirl movie, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. I think they're not going in that route for whatever reason. So after they have all won, after everything is to supposedly be resolved, we have at one point where Clark is to go on and like wonder with Martha, because like Clark is to just be like, man, I wish that Dad could have seen the man that I was to become. And Martha's like, well, I think he knew. I think he knew. As at one point, as a young kid, Clark was to go on and put this cape on and kind of just be putting his arms off to the side, and so Jonathan knew that his boy was going to become the greatest superhero of all time just by seeing this one pose that he is to do, kind of basking and whatever. So we go on. We now find that Clark is decide nonetheless to become a Daily Planet. I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. I was gonna sneeze, so I sneezed. Anyways, Clark is to now decide to become a reporter for the Daily Planet, and so he goes in there, and we of course have kind of business as usual. We have Steve desperately wanting to try and get somebody with him to go to a basketball game, I think it is, courtside. Yeah, I'm assuming it's basketball. So all of a sudden, Jenny's like, hey, any takers? And she's like, I don't know about that. So all of a sudden, Clark is to make his way by Perry's introduction, and Lois Lane's like, "Oh, hey, Clark Kent." Like, "Oh, I don't know who you are." Yes, I do. I know you're Superman. So yeah, like we just kind of rattle it off with this kind of finishing touch of Clark being at the end of this, the Daily Planet. We also had the one moment where in this movie that I kind of forgot about, where Clark had gone on to this church to go and talk to Father Leon and mentioned that he's the one that this Zod guy is looking for, and he's kind of wondering like what he should do because like Zod can't be trusted, but he's not quite sure about the human race either. And so Father Leon's just like, well, you just have to go on a leap of faith and just see like what happens with that, like see how you're rewarded. And it seems that eventually we have like Colonel Hardy that's going and telling his guys it's like, okay, like this blue one, he's with us. And so like all of a sudden they're like, meh. So also at the end of this movie we have Clark or we have Superman here who takes down a satellite of sorts or a drone of sorts and stops General Swanwick and his captain in their tracks. And so Swanwick gets out of his car. It's like, "Are you out of your effing mind? You know how much that cost?" And Superman's like, "Well, yeah, but like, you guys aren't going to find out where I hang my capes, so stop trying. Like, if anything, you're just gonna have to trust me." And so we go on. We have, of course, Superman fly off, and Swanwick is looking at his captain. Is like, "What?" It's like, "Oh, he's hot," and it's like, "Okay, sure, whatever." Like, you're gonna have him a poster on of him on your wall on some day. Am I gonna have to deal with that? Garbage. You're fired. That would have been one funny thing to have like in a blooper reel where he goes on and just fires his captain because like I'm sick of this like I don't like any of these whatever's these women that are just kind of falling over Superman. Um, yeah, but I think with that said, I think that covers most of this movie. Uh, did I do it all perfectly? Probably not. Did I go back and backpedal at certain things? You betcha, because that's just the way I do anything. If there is something that I probably did not go into specifics about, because I'm sure there is that, this review is what it is. But really, I think I can be happy enough about this one. Granted, certain kind of approaches or certain kind of things, like not actually looking at the camera when I should, because I'm going and trying to delete something off of my phone. So, heaven forbid I have to say that right now. So yeah, I feel like this movie is great. I like it, and some people may not all feel that way. Um, but really, if you're going to this review to just feel my weird and wild consensus of like, oh no, this movie sucks. No, it doesn't. Like, I thought I was gonna have a lot more problems with like the sponsorship parts, the whole like 7-Eleven and them kind of like bashing through that whole restaurant and so on and so forth. The Sears and stuff, and like just me going through like, oh my god, there's so much sponsorship here. But I think the very first time around, I think that would have gone on and been more noticeable. Where I think this time around, I think it blends in more to where it's like not an obvious thing where it's like, oh, this sponsorship, oh my god, there's so much of it, and yada yada yada. So yeah, I think with that, I think we're done. I think there's not much else for me to talk about, cover, and whatever. So that's good. On to possibly cover another DCEU movie that may not be the sequel to this film. That's some, like, but it eventually just get to the point where I cover all of this stuff. So because like I just cover all content. Plus, also really just covering this was to cover it also because of like The Witcher being out, and it's like, ooh, like let's cover some more Henry Cavill stuff. If it's not like a Mission Impossible movie, or if it's not some other kind of random thing that he had done at some point, like the one Uncle movie, the Man Called Uncle, or whatever that weird thing was with Arm and Hammer or whatever. But yeah, with that said, I think I'm just gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. A Man Called Uncle. What? I don't remember what that movie was called. I know it has Uncle in the title. Let me know in the comments below what it is, so that way you can just get comments. Even if it's like correcting whatever the word was, that's fine. So, bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.